Paying teachers what they're worth will not damage the economy. Paying police officers what they're worth will not damage the economy. Simple. If you have high systems of internal controls and checks and balances, you will have lower incidence of corruption. Whenever you create an environment that incentivizes corruption, you get more of it. Jamaica is such an environment. We're designed to incentivize corruption, so we get more of it. Now, here are some basic ways that we will eliminate corruption from the top down. Watch me carefully. It's actually much more simpler than people think. Bottom line is this. If we want to fix crime in Jamaica, we have to get rid of the criminals who created the crime. And that is the two parties. If they were to...
Welcome to the Frenzy Talk Show. This is where we talk everything Jamaica. Today we have a very esteemed guest with us today. Someone that I would say is a very ambitious man. He's the man that's vying and thriving for the non-partisan party and government of Jamaica. We have none other than Mr. Patterson. He's the UIC President. A warm welcome to you, sir. How are you doing?
I'm doing quite fine, and thank you so much for having me. Much appreciate the call and the invite.
Perfect. Before we start into all of these questions, I'd just like for you to explain just what's the ethos and the manifesto of the UIC. What we're really looking for when we talk about the UIC.
Sure. The UIC is a registered political party in Jamaica, and our commitment is to protecting the rights and freedom of the Jamaican people. Our philosophy is based entirely on ensuring that you as a sovereign person is fully protected from the state as well as from unelected criminals. We want to ensure that we have a safe, clean, and orderly country where everyone can live, earn, and retire with dignity with their sovereign rights intact. So in essence, that is it. Now we have specific plans and policies and program. One of them, and the most important, is to change the system of governance. Jamaica has been suffering from a bad system of governance for the last 80 years since self-governance and subsequently independence. Prior to that, of course, for nearly 400 years, we were suffering under the governance of colonialism. Unfortunately, since the transfer of power from the colonizers to the colonized, those who have been leading us have really been acting as agents of the colonizers and have not given up that role where they shift from pushing the agenda of the colonizers to actually pushing the agenda of the people of Jamaica. So we're here to correct that.
Perfect. And must I say that's very ambitious, and it's a very ambitious goal of the UIC and yourself. But one really quick question that I would like to ask you, just to start this off, is how we can see where the economy at the moment is very unbalanced. And I'm just intrigued to know, how do you plan to, have you got any plans to balance the economy where we can see where the macro and the micro is at some sort of stability, where one is not way more lower than the other? Is there any plans in place to rectify this?
Well, I'm very happy you asked that because it means you understand the difference between what you're hearing in the news about how well we're doing economically and what the people are faced with on the ground, which is a lot of problems. Basically, if you live in Jamaica today, you're either in the group of the 10% or the 90%. The 10% control the bulk of the wealth and the jobs, and by extension, the economy. And the 90% try to find a way to subsist and exist within that. The majority of whom live on very low wages, very poor standard of living, and pretty much work just to stay alive and to build the wealth of the 10%. So how do we balance that? It's actually much simpler than we think. The bottom line is that we need to change from a master-slave economy to a bottom-up economy. And what do I mean by that? You need to remove the regulations that protect big businesses and suppress small businesses. And pretty much almost every law we have in Jamaica are designed to make the lives of the ordinary people very difficult and allow the big businesses to have the upper hand because they can pay to overcome the many hurdles that are put in the way of small entrepreneurs and so on. So the UIC will remove those impediments and open up the economy to the grassroots. For example, ensuring that you have a more market-driven banking system, so more banking options, more competition in banking, more access to credit by removing all the restrictions that have made credit concentrated in the hands of a few, push that down into very, very small community banks where it's operating at the grassroots level and are not controlled by the big banking cartels locally and internationally. So you have to change that. You also have to change the monetary system whereby we have full control of our money and are no longer in a system where our money is controlled by external forces. We have to bring that back local and ensure that, the government once again owns the Bank of Jamaica on behalf of the Jamaican people, and the money of Jamaica is once again, well, for the first time actually, produced in Jamaica and is controlled by Jamaica, so that you cannot have external forces devaluing our currency by virtue of printing and distributing outside of the control of the electoral process. So there are many things we can do to make sure that the economy becomes a bottom-up one instead of what it has been forever, which is a top-down economy.
Very, very informative answer, to be honest. Just you touched on me understanding the difference with what's being said in the media and what's actually happening on the ground. For those who might not or may not understand, could you just briefly explain what's
Sure.
really happening in terms of the difference between the individuals and the GDP, etc.?
Sure. So really what's going on is that over the years, so we have two main parties. I call them the colonial parties. They have been in power now for about 80 years, from 1944 to present. Over the course of their existence, they have borrowed billions and billions of dollars, in fact, over $2 trillion in the name of the Jamaican people. Unfortunately, if you look at the Jamaican economy and the lives of the people, those funds were not spent on the people. Some of it was wasted and some of it was stolen. And so what you have is a huge debt that Jamaica had to pay off, but the people didn't have the better infrastructure, better school, better healthcare, or access to capital for entrepreneurs. They didn't get that. So basically, the people now have been like slaves all over again to pay off that debt. So we have had a lot of austerity over those years where the people have been sacrificed. They have worked hard, paid a lot in taxes, but got nothing for it. They're still very insecure because the police force is ill-equipped and ill-trained and not used in a way to make the people feel safe. So they're not safe. They can't build businesses in a safe way because they have to be worrying about the cost of security. Then their roads are not good, so they're not able to travel efficiently to get business done. They don't have a good public transportation system, which further reduces their productivity. They don't have a good healthcare system, and they have not been trained in school to lead a healthy lifestyle. So they're not living healthy, and they don't have a healthcare system that can help them. So again, we're losing a lot of productivity because of that. So what you're hearing in the media, however, is that we're doing so well because the government has sacrificed us to pay down the bad debt that they created. So they borrowed in our name, wasted the money, stole the money, and then sacrificed us to pay taxes to pay that off, and then tell us we're doing great because the IMF now says, wow, you're doing an amazing job. Look at that. You guys are really cool. No, you have sacrificed us. We're suffering. We're dying. We're hungry. We're unhealthy. We're unproductive. But the little production that we give, that is being used to pay back a debt that we have not benefited from.
I'm very glad you mentioned the IMF, but I'll ask you a question about that later on. But you did say a lot about the government essentially not caring about the people enough, and I think we talk about infrastructure development and we almost neglect one of the most important resources, which is human resources. What are the plans for the UIC in terms of healthcare, education, just to bring the country to where it needs to be? The country is
Sure.
probably, to my opinion, the country is still living in 2001. Especially when it comes to the tech
Beyond that,
aspect. Yeah,
we're,
exactly.
we're back in some communities. We're still in the 60s and 70s in some
It's
communities.
embarrassing. Yeah,
There's still many Jamaicans who have very poor quality, if any, bathroom facilities in their homes. Some are still using outside bathroom facilities that are not designed for the 21st century. Many Jamaicans are living in homes that are falling apart around them. They inherited those homes from their great grandmothers and fathers. They can't fix the roofs, they can't fix the floors, they can't fix the windows. So they're just living on the edge. There's some literally living on the edges of hillside where their grandparents captured a piece of land many years ago, and they're still living in that house, which is teetering on the edge. So we're really living poorly. But to your main question, which is, how do we address these things? Healthcare, education. Well, first of all, first thing, you have to cut off the corruption, because that pulls money away from these institutions into the pockets of politicians, and not just politicians, because you must understand this, and many Jamaicans don't yet fully understand it. We look at the politicians, but they're simply agents. They're not the true problem. And let me try to explain this. The politician is simply a representative of somebody. Now, what you wanted was for the politician to be a representative of the people. That would be a good situation if your MP represented your constituencies, if your senator represented the people. But that's not the case. Here's what is really the case, right? In Jamaica, you have two parties that were created from the very beginning to trick the Jamaican people. They were created to get rid of Marcus Garvey and to get rid of the Marcus Garvey party and to prevent those ideas of equity and equality and justice and industry and productivity of the people owning their own assets and growing with it. They made sure to push that aside and gave us two controlled oppositions to divide us so that we may now stop fighting for our rights and start fighting each other. Okay? So what happened since then? Who gave us those two parties? Well, back in the day, we called them the plantocracy. These were the people who still owned the massive estates across the country, which were previously slave estates where you had chattel slaves, and now at that time they now had wage slaves. So you move from chattel slaves, meaning you owned the individual, you could beat him, rape him, kill him at will, and work him to the bones, and nobody would say anything. That was the old system. The new system was you kicked him off the plantation and say, if you want, you can come and work for me. I will not give you back your land. I will not compensate you for your lost labor. I will not compensate you for your lost learning. So now you're free, but you're free to do what? You're free to come and beg a job from us, the plantocracy, who still own the land and still have the value of the labor of your ancestors that we had stolen, and we run things. So what we did now, these so-called plantocracy, they now funded these two parties behind the scenes to create a facade of two parties who cared about the people. And the people then learned to trust these two parties because they were led by two white-looking men. And remember, we were trained to believe that white is good and black is bad. And so here are two white-looking men who said, we care about you. One of them pulled his shirt and told the police, shoot me and leave the people. Of course, that was staged, and the people fall for it. The other one was a well-trained barrister from England who had learned the ways of his masters and came back to implement it. So together, they concocted a constitution that tells us that it's the Jamaican constitution, but really, it's the British constitution, the British government, the British monarchy, their constitution about how we, their subjects, should live our lives. And so we have been following that to this point. Now we the people, because remember, back in 1962 when we got independence, more than 80% of the country could not read or write. So that means the people really had no say in the future of their governance. These two fake representatives of the people falsified and fraudulently imposed a constitution on these ignorant masses. Now, what happened after that? Since then, we, the people, accepted them as our representatives, not realizing that they actually represent the plantocracy, which today we call the PSOJ oligarchs, the private sector organization of Jamaica, where the biggest and richest companies come together, the most powerful people in Jamaica, the most dominant commercially rich families in Jamaica, and then they now say, okay, we will put these two people in front of them, green and orange, let them fight, give them some money to have all kind of campaigns and buying votes. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which one wins. We, the PSOJ oligarchs, the former plantocracy, will still be firmly in charge because all the laws, all the policies, all the regulations will be designed to protect our interests against the interest of the majority.
Again, a well informative answer, and you mentioned something about corruption, which is very. I'd like to know how is it, because from my perspective, it's almost impossible to eradicate corruption, but there's always ways to minimize or almost scaring people from being corrupt because of what they can get as a impediment. So how do you plan to treat corruption and ensure that in your, say for instance, you become the president of Jamaica or the prime minister of Jamaica, how can we expect you to behave when it comes to corruption?
Sure, very good question. Now, corruption, as you said before, you cannot have a corrupt-free environment in a world of men.
Right.
So what you can have, however, is a low corruption environment. For example, what they achieved in Singapore. Singapore is one of the most anti-corrupt country in the world. So if our leaders were interested in eliminating corruption in Jamaica, all they would have to do was simply copy Singapore if they wanted to eliminate corruption. Now I'll tell you how we're going to do it. We have studied carefully Singapore, but we also have some ideas of our own building on that. The first thing you must do to eliminate corruption is to design a proper system of internal controls with proper checks and balances. It works everywhere. It's, for example, if you're working in a company, if the company has poor internal controls, you'll have high incidences of corruption. It's that simple. If you have high systems of internal controls and checks and balances, you will have lower incidence of corruption. Whenever you create an environment that incentivizes corruption, you get more of it. Jamaica is such an environment. We're designed to incentivize corruption, so we get more of it. Now, here are some basic ways that we will eliminate corruption from the top down. Watch me carefully. It's actually much more simpler than people think. Right now in Jamaica today, if you're a member of parliament on the government side, and by government side I mean the party that wins the most seats in the House. If you're an MP, your primary goal in life as an MP is that the Prime Minister, who is the leader of your party, that if he wins a seat, is for him to give you a ministerial position. Why do you want a ministerial position? Well, in a ministerial position, you have far more clout, you have access to far more money, and you have more opportunities to engage in corruption if you're a minister of government. Similarly, in our system, the Prime Minister, he appoints 13 members of the Senate, while the opposition leader appoints 8 members of the Senate. That is so ridiculous, but let's look at it carefully. If the Prime Minister appoints senators, those 13 senators he appoints, their sole ambition is that he will further appoint them to a ministerial position. So now what you have happening is your senators and your MPs, the majority of them, are beholden to the Prime Minister. And they're incentivized to cover for the Prime Minister and for their party because they have a vested interest to do what will make them be seen as good for the party and therefore be rewarded with a ministerial seat. Now, when you do that, here's what you have done. Your senators and your MPs who are supposed to be providing oversight concerning the functions of your executive, they're now commingled with the executive. So they're now conflicted. You don't have a conflict of interest because your senator who's supposed to be saying, let me scrutinize what the executive branch is doing, that is the head of government, in this case, Prime Minister,
Right.
the cabinet being the ministers. Your senators and your representatives, their job should be to be scrutinizing whether or not the executive branch, Prime Minister and cabinet, are doing things properly, meaning the citizens are getting value from money. So we collect $2 trillion in taxes. Have we spent that $2 trillion properly? And they should be microscopically looking to see if the government is making any mistakes or doing anything wrong. Instead, they're also a part of the cabinet. So you cannot, you're now asking them to monitor themselves because you're in the House of Parliament as an MP or a senator, but you're also a minister of government, or you're hoping to be a
To be.
minister of government. So that means you're not going to ever truly, seriously criticize or study for the purpose of the benefit of your constituents what's going on and attack any corruption because you are now a part of it. So you are implicated on two fronts. One, if you're appointed, you're implicated. And two, if you're not yet appointed, you're hoping to be, so you're conflicted. So do you realize, therefore, that two things happening here? One, you are beholden to the prime minister and you're beholden to the party that got you elected. And most importantly, your party is beholden to the PSOJ oligarchy that funded your election. So where does the people fit in here? Nowhere. So even though you're an MP and you were elected by, let's say,
The
30
people.
people, they have no concern on your plate. They're low on your agenda because your primary goal as an MP is to suit your party and to suit the PSOJ oligarchy. Now let's talk about the opposition side. So if you're now an opposition MP, what is your motivation? Well, we have told the people that we have a government and an opposition. Follow me carefully now. So by the way we design our constitution, we say the party with the most seats is the government and everybody else is the opposition. So what you have just done, you have told the people that they will oppose no matter what. So even if it's good, they're going to say it's bad. And if it's bad, they're going to say it's worse or bad. So you have now created a situation where you cannot trust the opposition because they're normally going to say it's bad if it's good and if worse or bad if it's really bad. So you can't trust them. Now let me ask you a question now before I go on to the next part. If you're running your company, you have a company, and this company, the goal of the company is to make a profit by meeting the needs of its customers and growing its customer base. Is it advantageous for you to take your board of directors and split them in two and say one half must fight against the other half on the board, and then that's going to result in you having a very good outcome for your company? Is that logical?
Not to me. It's not logical. No.
But that's what they have done. The design of our constitution, the design of our government, and in other countries they do the same thing, but it's unwise. So what we want to do, the UIC, we want to create what we call a non-partisan constitutional republic. Three words: non-partisan constitutional republic. What does that mean? It means that we're going to design a system, and I've already done so, a system that is non-partisan. That means when you're elected as an MP, you're not a government MP or opposition MP, you're just an MP. And you get all the privileges and all the rights and all the resources that an MP needs to get to represent his constituents. So it doesn't matter if you came when you were running, you called yourself a JLP or you called yourself a PNP or you called yourself a UIC.
Right.
You can call yourself that if you want, but when you're elected, you will sit in alphabetical order in a circle. You're not sitting beside we're the group of JLP and we're the group of PNP or we're the group of UIC. You're now sitting just as an MP. And as an MP, you're looking out for the interest now of your constituents. I'm going to tell you why you're going to do that. Similarly, for senators, instead of being senators being appointed by the prime minister and by the opposition leader, 13 by prime minister and 8 by opposition, foolishness. What we're going to have is every parish elects one senator or two, whatever number we decide on. So every senator now has a vested interest. They were elected by the people of St. Catherine or the people of St. Thomas or the people of Portland, all 14 parishes. And you come now to the Senate to do what? Whatever there's a bill that is passed by the lower house and come up to the Senate for approval, you will all know, the 14 of you, look at that bill from a parochial standpoint. How will this bill affect the people of St. Catherine, the people of Trelawney, the people of St. Elizabeth or Westmoreland or Hanover or St. Mary or St. Anne? You know, that's what you want. So now your senators now are divorced from the executive branch. You're not mixed up in that. They're not appointed by no prime minister. They're elected by the people to give that second review of the law that's coming to them to be approved. And they're looking at it from their parish perspective. So before the bill is passed, it is now given the overview of how this affects all the parishes because each parish is fully represented and they're represented equally. So you'll always have equal parish representation in the Senate. In the House now, here's how we fix the problem of people being beholden to the Prime Minister and looking for a ministerial seat. We're going to pass a law that says to be a minister of government, you cannot be a senator, you cannot be an MP, you must be somebody who has the competences for the office in question. We call them a subject matter expert. So if you're going to be a health minister, you're somebody who is trained, competent, and qualified in public health. And therefore, the learning curve for you is much smaller, and your ability to lead that ministry is much more improved. The same thing for the finance minister or transportation or national security or whatever. But those persons now don't have to be politicians, for example, because now we're empowering the nucleus of the executive, which we call a president and so on. That nucleus now, their job by law would be to find the best Jamaicans around the world, don't have to be living in Jamaica at the time, the best Jamaican anywhere in the world who has the competences, and invite him or her to say, would you like to serve in this ministry or that ministry? If they say yes, then they're nominated. The nomination goes to the Senate, where the Senate publicly interviews this person, vets this person. Publicly, all MPs can watch, all of Jamaica can watch. They can hear the thought process of the people. They can see the posting of their credentials, their experience. And then the Senate now votes to say, we would like to recommend this person. And then the House of Representatives vote to say we confirm the person. What does that do for us? It means now we're really focused on the best and brightest Jamaicans being attracted to serve in our government, and they don't have to first become politicians and play all the political game and whatever. But now they can lend their skills to building a truly powerful Jamaica. Now the other side to this, my good friend here, is how do you remove the PSOJ oligarchy, big money, or even bad money from the electoral system, because that's what drives political parties. They're funded by some people, and those people then get to dominate the party and dominate the country and dominate the government. So what we have done, we have said, let's have a 100% publicly funded system of governance. What do I mean by that? Here's how it works. You set up the parameters. What are the qualifications to be an MP? What are the qualifications? So we set some standards. Let's say, you need to be this age, you need to have this citizenship, you need to have this level of experience and this levels of qualification. So for example, you must be able to read and write, minimum.
Yeah.
If you're going to serve in government though, the standard must be relatively high. And here's why. You don't go to a carpenter for medicine, for medical treatment. You don't go to a nurse for accounting. You don't go to a plumber for dentistry. So why should we allow our politicians to just be willy-nilly persons who may or may not have the competency? For example, how many politicians can read a graph, analyze statistics? You're making decisions about the rest of our lives, but you don't have to have any proven competences. So we need to have some basic competences that says you must demonstrate that you have these competences. You need to have some level of work experience in the world of work. Look at the current Prime Minister. He went straight from university, practically right into a seat. And the evidence of his lack of ability is so very clear. So what you want is you want to have persons who have I would say to be an MP, you need to have at least 10 years experience in the world of work, where you have proven
Well,
yourself, as a supervisor, a manager, a vice president, a president, chairman of a board. You've shown that you can. You're an entrepreneur. You've built a company. You're maybe a professional within a space, law, accounting, management, engineering, whatever it is. But show that you have some real competences.
right. While that's very ambitious and it's almost a no-brainer, but is it practical and achievable? Because are we going to be looking at just qualifications, or we're going to look for people that actually care about the actual country?
No, don't get me wrong here. And I'm leading to something. Remember, what I'm saying is, you can care all you want to, but would you like a person who cares a lot about people but don't know how to fly a plane to be flying you from one part of the
No,
world?
not necessarily. No, but I am saying if it's just based off experience and experience and knowledge about what you're doing and knowing exactly what you're doing, essentially, are we gonna just dismiss the fact that someone can have the best interest at heart?
No, no, no. We're not dismissing anyone. What we're saying is you need to have a set of standards,
Fair enough.
and that's just normal. While like we all would like to open anything to everybody, but if you do that, there are some serious consequences. If you allow everybody to practice medicine regardless of their competencies, you have serious consequences.
That's true.
If you allow everybody to drive a car regardless of their competencies, you have serious problems. So
Right.
how can you have the running of your nation? That affects everything else. The running of your nation affects all the other laws and regulations. It affects nursing, education, transportation, food, sovereignty, civil rights. That affects. So you cannot afford to minimize the role of those who serve in your political arena. So here's where I'm going now. So first of all, you set up the standards, the criteria. So they're objective. They're not leaning anywhere. They're objective. But what you do now, you say a person who wants to run for office, all they have to do is to apply, demonstrate that they've met all of the criteria. Once they meet the criteria, one of which is to go into your little bowl of community and get the people to sign a nomination form to say they are willing, they think you would make a good president or a good vice president or a good senator or a good MP, whatever it is, right? And so you get a certain number of signatures and they're validated. And you make sure that when they give those signatures, you put beside it that once you sign this thing, you're giving your vote to that person. So you can't go and vote to somebody else now. So that now makes it serious, right, to the person who's going to sign off.
Yep.
Some people will get nobody to sign off for them because nobody would want to, or they might get one or two, but not enough to meet the requirements. So you have that as a standard plus the experiential qualification and so on, right? Once you meet that, every candidate gets the same thing, the same access to newspaper, radio, television, internet, town halls, and debates. Now the citizens get to see everyone equally. When it comes time to, and so no private money now is involved. There's no PSOJ money coming in. There's no bad money. So no, it's against the law to donate any at all to anybody's campaign because every candidate who meets the requirement will get the same exposure, radio, newspaper, television, internet, town hall meetings, and debates. So you get to see all of them. And you have a government website where every single one of them are there. You can click on their name and you can see comparatively what is his or her manifesto, name, where them come from, what they like, they don't like. You click on a video, see what they said about this topic, that topic, this topic. It's all there and you can watch it multiple times. It's there for posterity. And then you now as a voter will be able to go intelligently and vote, not because of hype. Now it's hype. Now somebody comes and pay $5,000, give you a T-shirt, give you a cap, feed a bunch of people, and they're just voting now. And some people are voting because of their mother, grandmother, and grandfather had voted for this. So what you're going to do now in the system we're trying here, I think we're having an internet disruption. So I'm going to pause for a second until that recovers. Let me know when you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what happened just now.
yeah, internet interruption on one of our sides. So what I was saying
That's fine.
before,
Yeah.
so hear carefully now. You now as a candidate. So let's say you're a rich guy in the community, you would have been able to just pay for all kind of stuff. And let's say you're a poor guy in the community. When I say poor, doesn't mean you're dirt poor. Maybe you're a teacher and you
Right.
teach and you are
Teachers aren't poor. Just to get that clear,
right.
teachers aren't poor.
Right. Well, in Jamaica they are. But let's say you don't have a lot of money, right? But you want to run for office. In the current system, you have no hope unless you go and join up and get that funding from the PSOJ oligarchs. In the new system we're proposing, you, as long as you meet the criteria, so as a teacher you would have met the criteria. You can read, you can write, you have experience, and you go and get your signatures in your community and you're on the ballot. And now you don't have to worry about amassing a big war chest from private donors to now go and compete. You now will have the same voice as the richest person in the country. The richest person in the country have no greater voice than you in this campaign, and you have no less voice than him or her. You're now given the same radio, television, newspaper, internet,
Right.
whatever, right? So, and then now, when it comes time to vote, the ballot doesn't say JLP or PNP or UIC. It just says John Brown, Mary Jane, Tony Dawkins, whatever the number of candidates are. And what you're doing now with that, you're causing the electorate to become very much more intelligent. Now they're not going to vote for the bell or the head or the handshake. They're
But
gonna,
that how do you plan to? Well, first I want to just dissect a little bit of what you just said. You said you want to essentially dissect Parliament how it is now.
yes, we're gonna do away with that.
Right. So that's and it makes sense. It's refreshing to hear that. But how are you going to convince? It's ambitious to think that's a goal and you want to achieve it. How are you going to get a diarted PNP or diarted JLP to not see politics from a political standpoint? I just want, out of interest, I just want to know.
Yeah, you're in any change. Whenever you have change in a society, right? Whenever you
Yeah.
have change in a society, there are some people who will kick and scream against the change, and they will only change because the system around them changes. For example, when a Jamaican leaves Jamaica, he's still a Jamaican. And the moment he lands in the USA or Canada or Britain or Singapore or wherever, suddenly your steam start to change because the system there does not facilitate his Jamaican
Yeah.
behavior. So in Jamaica, he may, for example, not line up to go into a bus because I just saw the thing set in Jamaica.
Yeah, he just, yeah.
But when he
Okay.
goes to Britain, he sees that he has to line up to go in the bus.
That's a very good answer. And I'm glad you touched on Jamaicans leaving because I would like to know how are you going to treat this disease that we have, this brain drain? I mean, we see not even just brain drain, but we see our public sectors, and like you just mentioned, teachers are poor. I would say they're underpaid. I want to understand
No, they're
what.
poor.
First of all,
Believe me, teachers are
first,
poor here. To be a
first
teacher
of
here, to be a teacher in Jamaica, to be a teacher in Jamaica, you're poor unless you have other means of augmenting your income. So, for
well,
example,
this is what I was
yeah,
just gonna jump into. I said I want to understand. It happens in a lot of different societies, but I don't feel like it should be happening in Jamaica because we haven't got the economy to facilitate someone having 3-4 different jobs. It's just not gonna work. I want to understand why is it? How are you gonna treat this brain drained one, and how are you gonna treat paying teachers an adequate salary without damaging the economy and damaging the public purse?
yeah. The only thing that's damaging the economy in Jamaica is actually the government. Paying teachers what they're worth will not damage the economy. Paying police officers what they're worth will not damage. The problem we have is that the government is using too much of our money for things that it shouldn't be used for. They're wasting too much of our money and they're consuming too much of our money without giving commensurate value. So let's step back for a second. Once we implement the UIC system of governance, which means now, look what you just did. You have now increased the caliber of your ministers of government. So these are now people who understand what they're doing. They
Right.
understand statistics. They understand demographics. They understand how to plan and how to prioritize, how to manage. So you're talking about skilled people now in your government, very highly skilled. So when we have a cabinet meeting and we're sitting around the table, it's not guesswork anymore. You're not sitting down with in the current situation, the prime minister currently, when he sits down with his cabinet and he has some 18 to 24 people around, most of them are highly incompetent for the job in which they're operating. They do not have the skill sets necessary to plan, organize, and direct the affairs of the country. However, most of them are very good at politics. They've been in it for a while, so they know how to con people. They know how to lie. They know how to deceive. They know how to deflect. They know how to distract. They know how to divide. So that's what they're good at, and they've been doing that very well. But that's costing us. So the UIC system? Look what the UIC system does. automatically we now have good, qualified, competent people in the cabinet, number one. Number two, you now have the senators and the House of Representatives truly representing the people. So when they come to the House, because they have no hope, none of them have any hope of being a minister, none of them have any hope of getting any benefit from their party, none of them have any hope of getting any money from the PSOJ oligarchs. So guess what? They now are zero laser focused on being representatives. Now you're going to see the roads being fixed properly because they have a vested interest in hounding the government and holding them to account for proper roads, proper
Right.
water infrastructure, proper electricity, proper school budget, proper health care. So now you're going to find suddenly we start finding money for the right things and not having money for the wrong things. And that's how teachers get better pay, police officers get better pay, but also we end up getting better teachers and better police officers because now those who shied away from it before because of what they see will now see a difference, and the best will gravitate towards these, and the worst ones will be fired because the system now has become more of a meritocracy where it's by merit that you progress, not because you're there.
Yeah.
Ago.
That's very informative. But this is all good and this is all refreshing to hear. But I would like to know, from my, I would say, minuscule understanding of politics and parliamentary and elections and stuff like that. But I do understand that you need to, for you to be prime minister, your party has to win majority of seats, right? So I just want to understand: is the office of the prime minister something that you'll be vying for in the near future, or how do we see you materializing all these plans? Because it's all good and to hear, but I want to understand how you're going to materialize. Because as far as I know, maybe I haven't researched enough, but your party hasn't got enough seats to be able to win an election.
Yeah, we don't have
So
a
I want to
single,
understand.
we don't have a single seat in the House right now in Parliament. So
No.
we are
Sorry, not for candidates per constituency
right,
to be able to win an election.
right. So at
So
the
I want to
moment,
understand,
so
how do you plan to maximize all that
right.
possibility?
There are a number of ways, right? First and foremost, if in the next election, for example, we were to win one seat, and according to the polls, the elections are likely going to be very close, like they have been in the past. So
Yeah.
let's say we have 63 MPs in the House, 63. So let's say both of the two colonial parties win 31 seats each, right? Neither of them could form the government if the UIC wins the one seat that holds the balance
Right.
of power. So now we, as small as we are, we would be very influential, right? Having only one seat. Now suppose we have 5 seats. That's even more influential. Suppose we have 10 seats. That's even
Yep.
more influential.
Yeah,
So
but
what?
I want to understand how are we going to get to that point where where you're gonna actually have a seat,
Right.
where we
So
can see you starting
right.
to have a voice in Parliament.
Right. So the first thing I had to do is to tell you why it is you don't have to have an outright majority to influence outcomes. Even right now, without even having a single seat in the government, we've been influencing outcome.
Right.
Many of their change in policies now to start speaking to the issues that we have raised is because we have raised them and they're trying to beat us now. They're trying to stop us from gaining momentum.
Do you
So
think that that's what it is?
of course. So they've
Oh,
been
wow.
trying very hard to suppress the UIC. So they've locked us off from mainstream media because remember, the same people who own the two parties also own the media. So they have manipulated the media to work against us. They've also shadow banned us on social media because they have the funds and the people to pay to go and do what they do.
Oh, wow.
Right? So they're doing everything. But at the same time, listen to them. You notice they have changed their language over the last few years because the UIC is gaining on them. So we're pushing them to now look at republic. We're pushing them now to talk about good governance. We're pushing them now to look at alternative energy, and so because even though we haven't won a single seat, we have been pushing them. When it came on to the recent pandemic, because of us, they were the lowest uptake of the injection. They only had 22%, while other countries were at 65, because we led a campaign against them forcing or bribing people or tricking people into it. We said we're not against any medication. What we're saying is do not force, bribe, or trick people into it. Let people have the information and then make their own personal choices. And because of that, we held them at 22%. The Jamaican people were empowered to say, no, we do not want to do this, and so on. So we're already impactful. But here's how we're going to become more impactful, because this is very important.
Yeah.
We're not taking money from the PSOJ oligarchs that fund the other two parties, right? So we are at a deficit, a serious disadvantage. Now, to me, taking money from the PSOJ oligarchs is not an advantage, because if we did, then what you'd have is three of the same thing. You'd have three parties owned by the PSOJ. So I am trying to convince my Jamaicans here at home and abroad to say, let us beat them at their own game. We the people.
Sorry, just before you continue, I just want to, for those who may be watching and don't understand what the PSOJ is, could you just tell them just the
Sure.
abbreviation?
So the PSOJ is a cartel. It's the richest people, the richest business and corporate entities in Jamaica, plus some others. You know, you always have other smaller ones involved, but the big guys. So you have the biggest, richest people who fund, like this election, they will give more than $500 million to those two parties. So what they do, right? Democracy is you can either have a true democracy or a fake democracy. In 1944, when the British gave us the right to vote, and I love to talk about this, right? Think about it. In 1834-38, they told the Jamaican people that you're now free, you're no longer slaves. So even though they told you you're now free, you could not vote. So what is that? Now, what they always do is whenever things get rough and the people start to agitate for their rights and it becomes too difficult to maintain, they simply adjust the system to trick the people. So in 1944, they adjusted the system and said, okay, one man, one vote. You can all vote now. But the constitution that they created said, but the governor of England, if he doesn't like what those you elect are doing, he can overrule it. Okay? So that was a fake democracy. Then they transitioned that fake democracy after 18 years of testing it to see if we would buy into it, if we were dumb enough to buy into it. And we bought into it with their duality, their duopoly, a monopoly of two, a duopoly. So they gave us a monopoly of two, where the PSOJ oligarchs, or the plantocracy back then, monopolized our election system by owning the two parties, putting them in front of us, getting us to accept them as our representative. When they win, we legitimize them. But the guys behind the scene, the PSOJ oligarchs, the richest corporate entities and families in the country, they're now controlling these two parties. And that has been the case ever since. So now we, the people, have just been tricked into voting for them. And whenever we get tired of one, which they know we will, we just go to the other one. And they just laugh because they know, okay, look at them now, fools. So they're now tired. They're now tired of this one. They hate Andrew now. They're tired. They can't stand him. They'll do anything to get rid of him. Fine. And all they're going to do is to vote for our other guy, Mark now. Vote for Mark now. Mark is going to save you. Mark is the savior. Vote for Mark. And when they vote for Mark, then they will say, oh my gosh, Mark didn't save us. What are you going to do now? Oh, don't worry. Vote for the new leader of the JLP. And the people will run over there. Oh, let's vote for the JLP. And they just keep going. Seesaw. And what's happening? While they're being divided, while they're being distracted, those richest families and corporate are busy extracting the wealth of the nation. So while for example, during the pandemic, when the people were
pandemic or the pandemic.
During call it what you will, while the people were suffering, the banks, the people, remember, people produce the wealth of the nation. And while the people were suffering, the banks were making billions. Their profits were highest ever. How can you have locked down everybody and the banks are still making billions? Very simple. The economy is rigged. It's designed to extract from the majority to maintain the affluence of the minority.
But in in majority of the world, the economy is rigged and it's set that way where.
Of course, but I'm talking about Jamaica. So my concern, the majority of, you see, my policy is this: if the majority of the world is doing something stupid, we don't need to follow.
But we don't want to create enemies around the world, or we don't want to damage relationships.
No, don't be foolish. why are you going to worry about damaging a relationship by doing something that's not stupid? So the worst of the world is doing something that's inflationary, and they're going to inflate away the purchasing power of their citizens. I would like to know that my government would be smart enough and sane enough to anticipate and see what is going on in the global economy and plan for and mitigate against bringing or importing that inflation into my
No,
country.
no, I meant around the world, worldwide relationships. As you're now going against the system that they've rigged, you're now
Right,
going against that system.
right.
So,
But
do
but
you
I'm
care
not.
about?
No, I'm not going to be
Sorry,
like
go on.
Michael Manley and pick a fight with people and say, you know, I'm going to join with this or do this. You don't need to do that. All you have to do is to be as diplomatic as Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore and focus on fixing your country. You don't need to fan any flames. You don't need to make any bold, brash statements and attack whatever. I'm just saying, we know that there's some foolish things globally. We don't have to drink them and eat
Adapt.
them
Yeah,
hook, line, and sinker. We
yeah.
can we can be nimble, we can be agile, we can be strategic, and we can position ourselves better. For example, Jamaica has always relied on oil for its energy. Always. Our primary focus has been oil for energy. Now Jamaica has more sun than many of the other countries that are first world, right? More sun. And we have a lot of areas that could be used to capture solar energy. Jamaica has a lot of biomass as well. So we could be a huge
Biomass.
producer of biomass energy, methane. But what we have done, we have leaders, again, because they may not have been very bright. Now they're talking about it because I have brought it up and really pushed it in there. So, but before, they just sat there on their big fat whatever, and they just allowed Jamaica to become more and more and more dependent on foreign oil as opposed to finding ways to make us more and more independent. Now, Costa Rica has done it. Costa Rica has made their country more reliant on local production of energy and have a smaller need for external imports for their energy needs. Costa Rica has done it. We can do it too. Look what we've done with our agriculture. We had some very bright leaders who taught our people to give up organic farming, to buy imported fertilizer, and to give up managing our own seed stock and to import GMO seeds that wipe out our indigenous seeds. And then eventually, because we can't keep up with that, we decimate our farmers because we cannot compete with the local imports by following the same methodology as our competitors. Remember, the competitors produce the fertilizer and we buy it from them. The competitor produce the seeds, then we buy it from them, and then we try to sell it back to them. That's ridiculous because they would have had a much more advantage over us. So what we should have done, and which the UIC is proposing and they're gradually going to try to adopt in a way that doesn't work, we propose making Jamaica the organic food capital of the world, where we manage our own seed stock, like good non-GMO seeds, and create a seed bank and make sure we're keen on protecting our ecosystem, protecting our seeds, so that we become independent of the imported GMO seeds, building a large organic fertilizer production facility here, distributed, so we become a huge producer of organic fertilizer, and borrowing the technology from others that have been using it very well, like the Netherlands, which is one of the smallest European country and yet still the second largest exporter of food in the world. How could you get that? A small European country without our advantages, being the second largest producer and exporter of food, second only to the US, which is far bigger than them. If they can do it, we can adopt practices, water management practices of Israel, greenhouse farming and scientific farming like the Netherlands, and making our focus organics and becoming a competitively advantaged piece of the world that supplies the world with true organics, and let the rest of the people fight for the non-organic. We own the organic space and becoming the leader. That's 500,000 jobs off the bat, and not low-paying jobs. You're talking about scientists, engineers, administrators, accountants, technicians, agronomists, So you're talking a big, we're not talking like, the cane cutting jobs. We're talking about real solid jobs. And then we mechanize it, of course, mechanize it, but still make it human dependent, build the intelligence of our people to become very involved in this, run it right across the country, have a major factory in each of the 14 parishes, at least one major factory that is organic food production factory, invest in cold storage facilities, using geothermal energy to maximize our yield, and take Jamaica to another level as the leader of food production in the world, organic food.
Yeah, that's very, very, very ambitious, and it's refreshing to hear because I've always seen where Jamaica has lacked marketing. Jamaica almost lack everything. But just before we go, I've got one question for you, and it's a bit off topic. I just wanted to explain a scenario to you and just ask you in simple terms, what would you do?
Sure.
So you're being questioned by an anti-corruption body as the president of Jamaica, and your questioning leads towards illicit enrichment, corruption, tax evasion. It leads to serious questions. If you're completely innocent, what would be your next action?
Well, first and foremost, you have to ensure that, well, if you're being questioned and
Right,
you have all of your facts at hand, then
right.
you respond appropriately. But let me move away from your hypothetical and be a little bit more real about it. So we're talking about the current president, who has found himself in a lot of hot water. Um, you know, and um, I am no friend of the prime minister, but I'm also not a hater of the prime minister.
Right.
I believe in justice and fairness, and
Yep.
here's what my take on the whole situation, and I want your viewers to really understand this. The prime minister is being accused of many things, and his
No way
the
again.
situation looks very bad for him. Meaning, um, the the there it appears that the prime minister may have benefited from illicit enrichment, not just now, but if you were to look at his whole development. So the prime minister is today 52 years old, going 53.
Yeah.
Is an anomaly. Most Jamaicans of his age group doesn't have the amount of wealth he has. The anomaly is that while he has this amount of wealth, there is no clear evidence of how he acquired that wealth. Meaning, for example, you can see a person who, let's say they worked somewhere and then they leave that company and form their own company. And then that company did so very well, you can see it and say, wow, look at that. He built this amazing product and people are buying it, and he made it. Or he was a Warren Buffett kind of guy and he has made certain investment, build a portfolio, and look at it. Wow.
Right.
We can't see that for the prime minister clearly. You can't see it clearly. It might be there, but he has not been able to show us clearly between him and his wife how they were able to amass, even before this particular issue, the amount of wealth that they did for somebody who has been a lifetime in politics. He went
Right.
straight from the University of the West Indies, into a safe seat, right into politics. So he has been in politics all this time. All of my work. He and I are the same age group. All of my work life, you can trace my career. You can see, okay, he has worked here. He has worked here. He has gone from being a nobody to being a director of finance in the government of Canada, and you can trace it and see the whole thing. And you can say, okay, so that's how he made his money. You can follow the monetary line. But with
Yep.
the prime minister, it's very opaque. You can't see clearly how he got it. Now, here's the problem now. Now, a lot of questions are being asked, and people are wondering, and people are attacking him. The opposition leader is on it and is digging him on it, and so on. But here's the real issue. Here's the real issue. Why did the Integrity Commission not complete its work properly and then give us a complete report that includes one of two things. A prosecution of the Prime Minister. So they say, here's the
Right.
report, and we're prosecuting the Prime Minister because we have found evidence of illicit enrichment. Or two, here's the report, we could not find any evidence of illicit enrichment, even though we see things that look kind of funny, but we could not find the evidence. So therefore, we're not prosecuting, case closed. Instead, what they did was to put out what I call a half-cooked, half-baked report that only leads to innuendos, leads to assumptions and allegations, and now you're trying the Prime Minister in the court of public opinion, which I think is wrong and dangerous because it could be that the opposition party has colluded with the Integrity Commission to seek to bring down the Prime Minister through political means because they could not actually prove that he has done anything seriously wrong. Now, you can say, for example, he has a lot of bank accounts. There's nothing illegal about having a lot of bank accounts.
Right.
He has moved a lot of money around in those accounts. It's questionable. You can say, wow, where did he find all this time during the middle of
Right.
the pandemic to be dealing with all of this? It's suspicious. But again, nothing is wrong with moving a lot of money around in your account. Any Jamaican prime minister otherwise can own any number of businesses and have any amount of money flowing between those businesses. Now, could there be a tax issue, tax evasion, tax avoidance, whatever it is? Sure, there could be, but that's not the remit of the Integrity Commission. That should have been a quiet report to the investigating bodies to say, okay, we see something here that looks fishy, but it's not our area of work or expertise. We're passing it to you. You can do that. Doesn't need to go into a report about your work because the truth of the matter is that's an allegation. You're
Well,
alleging, you're alleging that the prime minister may have done. So you have a duty of care to send that on to the tax administration of Jamaica for them to investigate. Or if you think there is some kind of fraud, you send it on to the fraud investigation. But you do not put that out into the public, which is an allegation that is not substantiated and is outside of your remit. Your remit is to attest to, did you get the declaration? Have you proven that the assets that he has and the income, they connect properly? If they're not collecting properly, what have you done to investigate that? And is your investigation complete or not? If you need more resources, you should be coming to the parliament to say, I need more resources, not to air all of the suspicions, but to ask for more resources to complete your job. They said they had and forgive me because I sound like I'm defending the Prime Minister, but I'm not
no,
defending.
no. Go on.
What I'm defending is good governance and justice. If we allow the Integrity Commission to be weaponized against one politician today, that many of us might think is bad and many of us might want to see him go, it can also be weaponized against a politician who is good that many of us want to stay, but now they're using the weaponization to get rid of him or her. So I would rather the non-weaponization against good or bad, whoever we like or don't like. Let's have a truly effective investigation process. And what should have happened? Here's what should have happened. The bottom line is this. You want to find out the source of the Prime Minister's income. That's the bottom line. I'm an auditor, I'm an accountant, I'm a CPA, chartered professional accountant. Now, I'm saying, why didn't the Integrity Commission simply just go and prove where his money come from? That's all you want to prove. The source of the money.
And
That's all.
and my take has always been this on it, because when I read the Integrity Commission Act, it says in there that they can use judiciary means to get whatever they want to.
Yes, exactly.
And I've always said there are some very serious questions, and everyone sees that.
Yeah.
However, there's no evidence that he's been illicit enriching himself. To my knowledge, there might be something else. Everyone's asking about the report, etc.,
But you're
etc.
defaming him. You're
But
defaming
I
him.
look,
Yeah.
I look at it on a flip side as well. Should the prime minister, for whatever reason, hypothetically, be illicit enriching himself, I personally don't think the IC would come out and give a report, submit a report to Parliament with all of that inside of it. For one reason, if he gets prosecuted, then it leaves the country without a prime minister.
No, 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 no.
Essentially, no?
The current constitution is very clear. If what will happen? Let's say the prime minister, let's say the Integrity Commission had done a thorough job, and based on their findings, which they have the right to do, they have the power to do, they simply prosecute the prime minister, and by prosecuting him, he would have to resign because he's now under, he's no longer under investigation. He's being prosecuted in a court of law for illicit enrichment, and it's untenable for him to remain. Now, that would be lawful and legal. Now, what would happen if that happens? If the prime minister resigns, the caucus meets, and the law says the MPs simply select a new person to be prime minister. That's all. They simply select one of them to be prime minister. No, that's the law. And you see,
but
in Britain,
with that being said,
yeah,
I feel like this is just my personal view. I could be wrong. I feel like the IC, which I think is a very reputable institution, right? They have enough knowledge to see that, listen, there's no one in there right now that can take the country.
No, that's not their job. That is not.
Well, no, fair enough. And
no,
this is just my opinion.
I know, but I honestly don't think that we should go down there. And I'll tell you why. We do not want our various branches of government to start assessing political outcomes.
Fair enough.
Their job is simply to focus on the law, and the law must be applied to all of us equally. Whether we are a prime minister or we're a pauper, the same law must apply. So my concern is that they have done themselves an injustice, because what they have done, they have now brought, in my opinion, possibly brought the Integrity Commission into disrepute and making it seem more political than it ought. Do not be a part of anything to bring down anybody. Your goal must be to apply the law. If you have found evidence, prosecute. If you have no evidence, close the case. Don't go fishing. You see, if I'm beginning to think that we have a competency issue here, because the truth of the matter is, the Integrity Commission, I believe, from where I sit as an accountant, had enough access to be able to prove the source of the Prime Minister's income. Let's say they discovered that the Prime Minister, after you match all the deals and match all the movements and line it all up, because you can move money around all you want. A forensic auditor will simply put, okay, I know it's jumbled up, but we're going to line it up now. A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3. Line it all up and then say, okay, where is the ultimate origin of this money? Yes, 50 million may come from over here, 25 million over there, 10 million over there, but look at the sources. And what they probably would find is that the Prime Minister has had sources which he is unable to explain, and they, having checked, cannot find any documentary evidence in his records to show where it came from. And that by itself proves illicit enrichment. You now go to prosecution, you go to a court of law, and you present your evidence. The Prime Minister is unable to account for how he is able to have an asset, a net worth now of this. We take it from where he was here, and we have now mapped it to here, and we have mapped it to here. And when we have put it all together, after all the talking, all the meetings, all the in and out, all the phone calls, all the emails, whatever, there is still no clear source of this money, and he cannot explain that, and by extension, he's therefore guilty of illicit enrichment, and that's it.
If it's that simple, then it begs the question as to why all of this monstrosity is happening.
Yes, and I'll tell you why.
If it's that simple,
let me tell you why.
Going on.
Let me tell you why. They do not want to prosecute the Prime Minister, because if they do, it will lead to other prosecutions, including the leader of the opposition.
That's a big allegation, but we'll
Yes.
leave it there.
No,
We'll
no. Let me tell you. Here's what will happen. If they, you see, Jamaica's sitting on a time bomb. Here's a time bomb we're sitting on.
Right.
Those in the, okay, you know that Jamaica is a crime problem, right? We know we have a crime
Right.
problem.
Yes.
What many people don't realize, the crime problem is actually the two parties.
Yes. Yes.
Because if any of them were to try to truly solve the crime problem, they would be implicated in it, and they would be brought down. So if the JLP try to truly solve the crime problem, truly, I mean, have a proper investigation, thorough from cause to effect, just like how Bruce Golding had to then resign because
Right.
all of the stuff led back to him as well.
Yes.
And before it led back to him, he was still prime minister, speaking powerfully, speaking, and in his jacket and tie, and we all accepted him as prime minister. But we didn't know how deep and dirty behind the scenes was between him and other figures within our community.
So what you're saying is
Yeah.
the IC is basically protecting everyone else?
The IC, no, they're not protecting. What the IC, in my opinion, may be
Right.
doing, here's what is happening. Just like you were saying before, they didn't want to do certain things because of what you were about to say and so on.
Right.
But here's
Right.
what I believe might be happening. They have decided that they know enough to know that they can do what I'm saying, prosecute him.
Right.
But they don't want to prosecute him. So what they're doing is they're going to use the political means to prosecute him by him losing the election. You follow me? Let me say it again. So the Integrity Commission and the opposition leader and party, they are directly or indirectly colluding, in my opinion, to bring down the prime minister. So they're going to prosecute him in the public rather than prosecute him through the court, because through the court will get very nasty and ugly.
Yes.
And will lead to some more revelation.
A lot of casualties. Yes.
Yes. So let's bring him down politically, wound him in the eyes of the public, destroy him in the public without going the way of prosecution, because now we won't dig up all the dirt that will lead to many other people. So we'll just get rid of him, because the goal is just to get rid of him. Now, getting rid of him simply keep the seesaw in place. Remember I told you before? So they'll get rid of him, and we'll now go to Mark and Mark back. Remember, Mark, for example, Mark and many others know the crimes involved in FinSac, which they,
I want briefly, just because everyone talks about this FinSac and how it's damaged and crippled the Jamaican economy, and I'm intrigued to know, because people need to be held accountable, and you can't have someone that's crippled the economy trying to come a couple years later after they've got their coffers to now and say, I am going to rescue. It doesn't make sense.
So I can tell you, no one in authority will ever pay the price for what they've done in FinSac unless we elect the UIC to be able, because we're not tainted by it, so we have nothing to hide.
Right.
The other two have everything to hide. So notice what the current prime minister has done since the vicious attack on him, rightly or wrongly, the vicious attack on him. He has begun to now drop more words about FinSac and implicating Mark Golding, Omar Davis, and other members of the PSOJ.
And they're kind of playing what do you call it? A tug of war, corruption tug of war. Who's more corrupt than who? And it's getting a bit cartoonish now.
My good friend, and that is the game. Remember I told you before, it's a game. So the game is for you and me and all Jamaica to be a part of this green versus orange tug of war. While we're distracted, guess what? Those who really pull the strings are still behind the scene raking in the dough. Because they're still getting the government contracts, they're still getting the laws and regulations in their favor, they're still able to keep the majority of Jamaicans as low wage earners. They're keeping money out of our infrastructure, out of our education, out of our healthcare. while we now are here having to make heads or tails out of innuendos and half-baked reports and whatever. But the bottom line is this: if we want to fix crime in Jamaica, we have to get rid of the criminals who created the crime. And that is the two parties. If they were to implicate themselves, so they'll never really, never. Jamaica's crime problem is stuck with us as long as these two parties are in power, because they must maintain the veneer of they're trying to do something but never doing it because they would be implicated. The same thing now with the FinSAC inquiry. They both will attack each other and drop innuendos, but neither of them would ever push it to a true prosecution. And that's why the Integrity Commission will not push for a true prosecution of the Prime Minister, because if they were to do that, too many dominoes would fall, and I can assure you, Andrew will not go down alone, nor will the PNP be standing afterwards.
Well, there you have it. The man himself, Mr. Patterson, the leader of the UIC. Thank you very much for having this interview with me, sir. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Also hit the notification bell, and take care until next time.